I have some of my own questions that I'd like to pose too, but maybe I can first turn back to you all and see if there's anything that any of you would like to enter in with.
You're looking at me.
Well,
so.
you look like you want to say something. So.
How can I not? That was. I mean, I was of course tickled until the very end, and I'm very glad that the beginning of that talk was on tape. But there's one often quoted passage from that Carey article that you mentioned. There's another passage that infuriated me the most, and that is when Carey links the Danite chorus in Samson Agonistes to the pictures screened on British television of people in Arab dress dancing for joy in the streets. And what Carey seemed to me to be doing at that moment is using a crude stereotype of our own time as a means of advancing an argument in literary criticism. And I think that's an especially obnoxious form of the error that you've attributed to him. And it also strikes me that that's precisely the opposite of what good humanities scholarship should do. Not just because it's procedurally or professionally sloppy, but also because it's ethically wrong. One would hope that humanities scholars would have the cultural perspective to put an event like 9/11 in broader cultural perspective, perhaps to give us a broader sense of history, perhaps to challenge the cultural bigotries of our moment. Right? So that when I say that Western ideology must be challenged or its limits must be addressed, I think I'm referring to the kind of questioning that should take place within the humanities. And it would be nice if that also took place in society at large.
Quick. We have no particular skill in talking about the limits of this or that cultural formation, and we should stop it right away. We are not seers, we are not gurus, we are not therapists, we are not statesmen. We're just goddamn literary critics. That's it.
Having written, I've been on your side of this question, Stanley, when I wrote a book about the uses of the Bible, the political uses of the Bible, to make it a club, an instrument of destruction. That's what the Curse of Cain was about. And I looked at how the whole history of interpretation of it was lighting into passages and using it to justify violence, right? I mean, by just about everyone who's dealt with it. And I thought, gee, I can call that a form of idolatry because it's a form of instrumentalism, which is really the heart of idolatrous thinking, taking this thing as an instrument for my use instead of understanding it in its own integrity. Okay, so I can think like you insofar as that happens. But then when someone comes along and uses something like the Bible as an instrument of liberation instead of violence and oppression, are they being equally idolatrous? That is, when Abraham Lincoln uses the Bible to justify liberation, or when a movement in South Africa uses the Bible to justify liberation, am I going to call those people idolaters too? In other words, are we a little two-faced about this sometimes? Because there's what you're advocating is a radical divorce between ethics and aesthetics. And while I thought we were going to be talking about religion and violence today, I hear us talking about ethics and aesthetics instead. And I'm wondering if we can hold that divorce as clean as you want it to be, because after all, in Milton's time, he is promoting certain ethics that do reflect the ethics of his period and his politics and his religious vision. Are we able to separate our aesthetic judgments from those as cleanly as you like, is my question.
Yes, we are. In other words, what you want to do is consider the fact that the activity of commenting on and describing and perhaps evaluating aesthetic objects, works of art, also has its own ethics about questions about evidence, citation, the making of certain kinds of arguments, etc. Those are ethical questions, and they are important to the practice of criticism. The practice of criticism can also take its object of explanation, ethical programs and agendas, but it should not itself, in the largest sense of the word, be ethical. And as for the first point, what Milton would say to the quandary, or what about those people who use the Bible or anything else for a liberating purpose, Milton would say what he often says in the Christian doctrine, quote one of his favorite verse, which is, to the pure, all things are pure, and as its corollary, to the impure, nothing is pure. That's pure Milton.
It seems to me that we forget sometimes when we're dealing with a poet that the interpretation of meaning, even with the best ethics of our profession, is not such an easy matter. And I think it's particularly difficult with Milton because my reading of Milton is that he sets out to make his meanings sufficiently, I don't want to say ambiguous, but sufficiently broad as to allow and invite interpretive discourse. In other words, I think that Milton reflects in his style his emphasis on personal freedom and personal formation, if you will. That, and that becomes both an exciting feature of interpretation of meaning in Milton, and a problem. And it's the kind of problem that leads to the clash of Fish and Carey and Muhammad and Whitrick and all of these things that have clashed, all of these interpretive discourses that have clashed over Samson. So I think that you've made a wonderful grid here, Stanley. The problem is that it's not as simple as it seems, even for those of us who are literary critics, particularly dealing with a poet such as Milton, who sets it up for us. You know, James Joyce did it very deliberately. I think Milton did it a little deliberately too.
Well, certainly, I have to agree with you, because Milton conveys again and again in many places, most of them cited by Regina, that against set forms, against sentences written by the statute, sentences of 3 inches, against any imposition on a free and inquiring spirit of a model that has come from elsewhere. And that, of course, then does. And put this together with what I and others have called his internalization of value, his refusal to recognize value again as existing in a formula or in a text, even the 10 Commandments, then I think we do come around to exactly what you were saying, Suzanne.